Hello, this is Evan with New Life for Old Bikes. In this week's episode, I really intended to start with a new project bike, but something came up this past Saturday and I thought I'd share it with you. I went out to a local trail and I mounted a camera to the handlebars of my bike. I wanted to see if I could video our rides and how well they'd come out. Well, needless to say, I learned a couple of things. First thing I learned is I need a camera with image stabilization. It is very shaky. The second thing I learned is that the camera didn't need to be mounted on the handlebars. The camera needed to be mounted on my helmet, so when I turned my head, you would follow what I was seeing. Anyway, I was paying more attention to the camera than I was the bicycle. I was about 1.5 miles into my ride and I shifted down so that I could climb a hill. When I did, there was a loud crunching noise and my back wheel locked up. Fortunately, I was in a flat area and it had no effect except that I came screeching to a stop. When I got off the bike, I looked at the back of the bike to see what happened. Well, my derailleur was jammed firmly between the frame and the wheel. At that point, I had two choices. Choice one, carry the bike 1.5 miles back to the parking lot and load it in my car. That didn't seem like a real good option to me. I think I'd be rather cranky after the end of that. Option two was I remove the derailleur and continue. Now, I carry a backpack with me when I ride my mountain bike. If I ride a road bike, I carry a frame pack, which fits right here in the frame of the other bike. I carry several items in that pack which are very important. The first is a t-shirt, so I can change at the end of the ride. The second item is a drink. Third item is a snack. The fourth item is a spare tube, just in case I get a flat. The next item is a pump. It's a small one, it's about 8 inches long, and that's in case I have to change that tube. And the last item are several tools, just in case I have to do that repair. Anyway, so I was in luck. It's one of the things I did well that day. I went ahead and I pulled an adjustable wrench out of my pack and I removed the derailleur. After I removed the derailleur from the bike, I was able to continue my ride. Although at that point it was more of a hike. I rode the bike down the hills, I pushed it along the flat areas and up the hills. I enjoyed the rest of the day and loaded the bike up and came home. When I got home, I sat down and I had my snack. I thought about what in the world could possibly have gone wrong. That's a catastrophic failure. I didn't just bend the derailleur, I broke it clean off. I thought about what happened last April. Last April, I was riding on this very same trail on this particular bike, and I had an issue. There's a section on this trail that has a very, very sharp left turn, followed by a very sharp right turn, followed by a drop of about 20 feet, followed by another sharp right turn. Normally, I go into the first turn full throttle and skid my way around it. I carry enough speed to skid my way around the second turn, and then I usually catch a little air going over the hill. I hit the bottom and skid my way into the straightaway. This day, I didn't quite do that. I skidded around the first curve just fine, but coming out of it, I was a little wobbly. And when I tried to skid my way around the second corner, I lost it. It gave a whole new meaning to hit the ground running. The bike just came right out from under me and continued over the hill. It did some nice somersaults and flips and hit the bottom. I walked down to see how much damage I had done to the bike, and when I picked it up, I noticed the front wheel was bent. I disconnected the brakes on the front of the bike and looked everything else over, and it looked fine. What I found out when I got on the bike is the crank arm on the non-drive side of the bike was bent. It wasn't bent horribly. It was annoying, but it wasn't hitting anything. So I continued my ride. Not only did I continue my ride, but I went around a second time. After figuring out what went wrong, I put my bike up on the stand, changed out the crank arm that was bent, and trued the front wheel. Then I checked the rear derailleur, and I have a really heavy-duty guard around it, so there was no damage. Unfortunately, I didn't look any further. What I found out today is that the frame is bent. After my wreck in April, I should have checked to make sure my frame was straight. And since then, I should have been checking for wear on the cogs of the derailleur. Normally I don't do this because the derailleur is behind a big guard and couldn't possibly get bent. But from now on, along with checking for wear on tires and wear on brakes, my pre-ride routine is going to include the cogs of the derailleur. I have two derailleurs that I want to compare. The one on the left is a good used derailleur out of my parts bin. The derailleur on the right is off of the bike in question. If you'll notice the cog on the derailleur from the parts bin, the lobes are very wide and they're very deep. The one off the bike in question, the lower cog actually has some of the lobes broken completely off of it. If you look at the top cog, you'll notice how badly worn it is compared to the parts bin derailleur. These are very narrow and very shallow. I should have noticed this long before today. In order to measure the bike and make sure the frame is straight, we're going to need two things. First thing, a standard ruler. The second thing, a string. In this case, we're going to use a seamstress tape. The reason I'm using a seamstress tape is it's bright yellow and you'll be able to really easily see just how bent this bike is. First thing we're going to do is we're going to wrap our string, or in this case tape, around the head tube of the bike. This is the head tube. It's the tube that connects your fork to the handlebar stem. Normally, you pull that string or tape and tie it into the dropout. The dropout is this section right here where the axle bolts through the frame, and it's even on both sides, so you just tie it to the end. In this case, I want you to notice that it's hitting the suspension, so we can't do that. Since the suspension is in the way, we're going to do this a little differently. The first thing I did was I measured the tire wall to the inside of the frame, just to make sure it was perfectly even inside the frame. And it is. I measured it 3 times to make sure. This is to simply show you that I measured the other side of the frame as well to make sure that my tire was in fact centered in the frame. From here, I'm pulling the tape to the same spot on either side of the back tire. What I've done, I've pulled the cables out of the way so they won't interfere with this measurement. From here you can see the difference between the two sides. The distance between the tube and the tape on one side and the distance between the tube and the tape on the other is a significant difference. Imagine if the frame was really badly bent, how much wear it would have put on the derailleur. Unfortunately, the frame on this bike is made out of aluminum. Aluminum is very brittle, so I can't show you how to straighten this particular bike out. Unfortunately, this bike is a loss. But I'm not going to put it at the road, and I'm not going to bring it to recycling. There's an awful lot of good parts here, and they'll end up on some of our next projects. This is normally how you would measure a frame to make sure it's straight. The tape, in this case, wraps around the head tube and ties into the dropouts. All I have to do is take a ruler and measure each side. This particular frame happens to be straight. While we're checking the frame to make sure it's straight, the next thing we need to do is check these dropouts to verify they're straight as well. And as long as we already have a bike with no back wheel in the frame, this would be a good time to do that. In order to do this, we'll need a couple of items. We're going to need 2 pieces of threaded rod, 4 nuts, and 4 washers. What we're doing is we're threading a nut on either side of the rod with a washer on either side as well. The washer's there simply to protect the frame, and we're going to thread them real close to each other and verify that they do in fact line up. If for some reason they don't line up, all you have to do is grab the end of one of them and twist it and bend the frame. Now, this frame is steel and we can do that. However, if the frame turned out to be aluminum, this would not be possible. We can do the front fork the same way as well. Thank you for watching my video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something from it. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments below. And don't forget, like and subscribe.